So welcome everyone to the 6th conference on the mathematics of neuroscience and AI. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. It's amazing to see so many familiar faces from years gone by, as well as so many new faces that we're all really looking forward to meeting and hearing about your work. And you know, I think this is going to be a very good 4 days, and I encourage everyone to treat it very informally, in that go up and talk to whoever you're interested in, but also formally, in that we're thinking about mathematical modeling of the brain and mind. So if you could, I don't have a clicker. Can I have a clicker? Perfect. Thank you. So what is this conference about at its core? Well, at its core, the way we've been thinking about it is this is the place to come to discuss, to hear, to brainstorm radical new computational theories about intelligence. This is the thing that makes us most stimulated and interesting, and we've done in our work, and we feel just remains at the sort of frontier of human understanding and interest in general. And an important point of that is to also be thinking about data to challenge existing paradigms. And in that sense, today, Neural Data Day is trying to get at that idea of what data are proving kind of anomalous problems for the field. So we don't really mind, we're agnostic to the form of the computing device for our computational theories. We think brain, chip, also in terms of data, behavior, or inner workings are all fair game. Because I don't know whether anyone will contest this or not, especially over the last year. We don't yet have a unifying theory of intelligence, and we want one. As scientists, we're inspired to get one, and you know, that's what keeps us interested and thinking at night. So the other thing about this conference is we tend to hold it in beautiful locations around the Mediterranean, as many of you may have noticed at some point, and that kind of means having an ancient center nearby, so the old town of Split, and also access to the water for a swim, and I highly encourage getting out. It's bracing at the moment, but it's sort of very stimulating. And the other thing which we hope is beginning to be a defining feature is at these conferences we really place a lot of emphasis on like offline debate. So in having lunch, in the poster sessions, in after, getting together and really talking offline about what people think are the core challenges in neuroscience, what are the most exciting new theories, where someone in the 70s might have been slightly onto something and never quite developed it. So offline debate, we really love that here. What it looks like is every day we have a theme. So we begin with neural data, neural theory, cog-sci, machine learning, AI. We have 2 keynotes that day, more or less. We have invited talks, which are about 20 minutes, and spotlight talks, which are 5. And so through that, we get to hear about ideas from people all different career stages, and in sort of all different angles of thinking about the computational function of the brain and mind. And this is the map. This is a map of internet traffic to the Squarespace. So it's not quite indicative of who bought a ticket, and it probably reflects our marketing efforts a little bit as well. But so for some of our events, you know, they're very localized in like America or Asia or things like that. For this conference, we've seen a lot of people coming from Europe, in particular the UK, a lot of people coming from America, and I think later in the week, maybe on Friday, I think we'll see a lot of Croatians. It's a national holiday, so people have the day off and can come along. So it's the 6th international conference on the mathematics of neuroscience and AI, and I've got conference chair and founder Dan Nicolau up with me here, and we thought we'd just tell you a little bit, for those of you that weren't familiar with the sort of genesis of the conference and why we think these are interesting and important questions. So this was the first rendition of the conference, which you know, we ran during COVID times, and we ran it from the island of Rhodes in Greece. And we were told that there was no COVID on Rhodes, so we were allowed to go, but everyone else wasn't allowed to go, so they were virtual. And so Dan and I ran most of the conference from a jacuzzi in the town of Lindos. Which is both very nice and I think frustrating for people online, because they were like, oh, you're there, we could have been there too. And like, there's a little bit of noise in the background on the live stream feed, which we knew was the jacuzzi, but they didn't, because they were facing away. But the reason why we started the conference is Dan, a mathematician, and myself at the time doing neuroscience, were having these really productive and interesting debates, which basically went around the kind of theme of like, can we put more math into neuroscience, or what would result? And we might think of that as theoretical neuroscience, but I think Dan was coming from a very different background in mathematics. And both of us were appreciative of the fact that this was a really interesting way to review the brain data and theories about the brain anew, using new theories. That sort of continued, so we did a second year in Rhodes, and so this is, you can see, like, can we put more math into neuroscience? Dan and I deep in debate there, to the like horror of the barmaid who didn't understand a word of what we were saying. And whereas in the first year online we'd had about 20 participants, mostly friends, we got up to 40 in the second year. We then moved a very long way to the island of Crete, and actually we had quite a lot of people come out and join us in person that year. And so I don't know exactly how many, but it was up at, let's say, 60. We actually ran that conference from our Airbnb, but it had this amazing kind of spillover area on the balcony. And we feel like from that conference we started to get really high quality work submitted very early, and we started putting some of it online. But still, and then we went back to Rhodes. We had quite a lot of people that time. Everyone really leaned in with online and offline discussion, and I think broadly speaking, we were still considering this question of, okay, can we bring more mathematics into neuroscience? And then last year we went to Rome, and particularly important was having a conference chair and organizer, James Whittington, come in and start getting involved. And so James is a real heavy hitter in computational neuroscience, but has also begun to start thinking about how can we take neuroscience and math into AI, or at that time we were kind of 2023 to 2024. We had a lot of people who were in the British ambassador's villa in Rome. That was a very beautiful session, and I've seen a lot of people returning after that one, so I think people had a good time. And in fact, at that conference, we brought in this kind of theme of AI, and we really wanted it to be a challenge. Theories about neuroscience, theories about AI, how could they be productively combined, and what were we maybe missing? So 2025, that's where we are now. We have this beautiful venue on this beautiful coastline, but 2025 is a bit of a mystery year. For instance, we have no idea how many Croatians will show up on Friday. Really, the hotel's been getting a lot of phone calls. It might be like hundreds, it might be none. So there's some uncertainty there. Also uncertainty in that a lot of the Americans that would have come to the conference have basically been kind of confined to quarters. But we're really looking forward to the year. I think another interesting thing is 2025 looks very, very different from when we ran it in 2024. Over the last year, it really feels like the world has changed a great deal in a way that's sort of surprising, interesting to everyone. And I was trying to think of like an image to put for this slide. I thought I don't really need an image to put in this slide. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Whereas maybe, roughly speaking, in the past, we'd sort of been thinking a lot about how can we take these other disciplines into AI, building better AI, or maybe more energy efficient. I think now it seems like the paradigm has shifted quite a lot, such that we're thinking about how can we use AI or take AI into these other fields, right? Like Terence Tao has been doing this amazing stuff on using AI in mathematics. And there are a few other themes that kind of deal with this like intersection. So we've heard of Anthropic using like really neuroscientific or biological terms when trying to understand how neural networks work. And they call it their microscope. They think about circuit tracing. They think about the biology of large language models. We've also seen this kind of progression, probably not to maturity yet, of using AI in science to make kind of fundamental discoveries in science. So with Sakana, Future House, Google, everyone seems to be claiming now that AI can make good progress in coming up with fundamental discoveries. And maybe, like I said, we don't have a unifying theory about intelligence. Maybe it will be intelligence that finds us that theory itself. I don't know whether Jürgen is going to touch on that in his keynote on the last day. Excellent. But so if you've detected here something like an identity crisis or maybe a revolution, I don't think you're far off. And so I wrote and submitted this talk yesterday, and we went out for the team dinner. And just by talking to all of these wonderful people who are involved in these fields at kind of junior, increasingly senior levels, I think everyone is feeling that way. You know, what is the study of neuroscience? What should one do as a neuroscientist? Should one even do neuroscience? James Whittington kind of posed that as an identity crisis. Should one be thinking about how to get AI to help us do neuroscience instead? Or, you know, Taylor made a kind of great challenge by a lot of this terminology that we're using for language models, thinking, is we're essentially abusing it. You know, this is a different kind of thing. So we're all here, and you know, the question is, like, what do you do during an identity crisis or a revolution? And so, reflecting back, I think these aims are probably what one should be thinking about. How to be radical, how to come up with new computational theories, what are the data that really challenges existing paradigms. This kind of objective holds. And, you know, doing it with the brain, computers, behavior, or neural data, or the inner workings of circuits, that sort of approach seems to be changing quite a lot. We have these new questions, right? So we were thinking about taking math into neuroscience. We were then thinking about how can we build better AI, or maybe more interesting AI. Now we've got these other kind of interesting questions, but as neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, or ML researchers, they're very interesting. And so I think my kind of challenge, we need to be really ambitious. You know, I think one thing is clear, that sitting back in a field of changes and doing what one was doing before is probably not a good way to kind of survive and flourish in this new era. And so I want to challenge everyone to keynotes, invited speakers, posters, to really be thinking very ambitiously. How can we help? How can we change? What can we do? You know, last year I was talking about, could we bring a revolution in neuroscience by focusing on the kind of new mathematics or theory? For neuro and math to AI, are there new architectures we really think we could bring in for various functions that are fundamentally needed? New learning algorithms. So we're going to hear about one straight away, I think, in Wolfgang's talk. And what, you know, as cognitive scientists, what are really good evaluations that people are currently missing? Evals being a strange thing at the moment that's sort of partially driven by commercial interests and partially driven by a bunch of engineers. And then how can we should take the lessons of this deep learning revolution very seriously. So when we're thinking about scale, how can we integrate that into our general hypotheses and theories? So one thing, you know, talk a lot about the microscope. Could we come up with a unifying theory or a unifying mechanistic interpretability? So using the techniques that they design for assessing digital systems, large language models in the brain, using things that have been designed in the brain back into mechinterp. Or can we get to a place, so these theories that Anthropic come up with are very interesting, but still quite basic. So if you're familiar with induction heads, it sort of thinks about A-B structures at increasing levels of abstraction. Could we get to a place where we can actually bring in higher level theories from cognitive science or psychology or things? AI into neuro, can we use AI to do neuro discoveries? I think is one reason why that's really cool is it actually like licenses behavioral and experimental neuroscientists to feel much more relevant than they might have been feeling in the last phase. So getting really great data for these learning algorithms is extremely important, and they seem a long way off being able to conduct experiments autonomously in the physical world, or even knowing good questions to generate. And then the challenge is, okay, well, can AI actually discover a new theory about parts of brain function? When would that happen? This year, 3 years' time? And could it come up in a fundamental part of advancing science as new measurement systems? Can AI lead to new measurement systems that weren't being used but could potentially be invented very easily? So that's sort of part of the identity crisis. I think the other identity crisis is like, another solution to it is to build a very strong community. And so it's a community of thinkers at the forefronts of these fields. That's what we try and do with these events, and we run some other events as well during the year. So really binding that community very tight gives you a way to survive a storm. Because I think most of us also feel like there might be a lot of barriers going up in the world at the moment that pertains to Things like collaboration is really going down. A lot of the research being done at fundamental, at kind of parts of tech companies is not shared. Universities just can't run big models. There is a collaboration crisis. It's kind of in the dark, but in our other conferences where we bring together stakeholders across different groups, we find that nonprofits, there's a funding crisis. I mean, that's why the Americans aren't really here right now. There's a visa crisis, and maybe you can feel it as well, but sort of me and my friends have been feeling like there might be a shift in the general operation of the Western world, the decline in the middle class. So let's stick clearly and closely to the vision of building this community and coming up with radical new theories, and I think that kind of constitutes something like, well, if the drawbridge goes up, who do you want to be inside the castle with? And I don't know, Taylor, do you recognize this image on the right? Taylor is our literary expert. So this is from Dante, right? This is the first circle of hell, where Socrates and the other philosophers were sort of confined because they were born before the birth of Christ, so they couldn't be saved yet, and yet they have this amazing kind of slightly glowing place, even in hell, where the pure knowledge is discussed. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. And we can begin to do that through a sort of pure glowing coastline in Croatia, where we have this amazing old city nearby. So I encourage us to treat this maybe as, if the drawbridge goes up, at least we're in a beautiful hotel with an old town. We're going to be going over to the old town a lot, after the conference today. We really would love you all to come with us and just explore this very rare and beautiful place on the Dalmatian coast. There's a free shuttle service every day from the hotel. There are also kind of ride bikes. Wolfgang walked this morning. I don't think he thought it was a great walk, but maybe there's a slightly better, slightly longer route. You may observe partying Brits, okay? And I just wanted to warn everyone that doesn't regularly come into contact. I'm Scottish, so I grew up in this culture, so I feel I'm licensed to abuse it. But sunburned, loud, partying, not so conducive to the discussion of mathematics or neuroscience. But I have noticed that if you're in the hotel, they will mostly be here around the bar and sound system, whereas if you place yourselves here at the end, actually the music's quite pleasant, a nice volume, and you're able to kind of get out. I've also noticed in the cafe, they might be somewhere around here, and just here is fine. So what is the conference going to look like? Every day has session chairs and keynotes. We're really fortunate. I think this is genuinely the best lineup of keynotes I've ever seen at a conference. I think we're just extremely lucky to have such enthusiasm from such greats. So every day we'll have keynotes, invited speakers, a spotlight session where people move through very quickly. Day 1 and day 2 have a poster session after the talks, which is through in the second room. We'll open up the doors. We start with neural data, we move to neural theory, cognitive science, and then artificial intelligence. So this is kind of roughly at an increasing level of scale or abstraction, maybe. We also have had really amazing interactions with these great funders who, with their generosity, were able to put on these great events. One I'll flag is Context Fund. So Context Fund they're a VC, but they're very much looking to fund scientists. So if you're feeling like some of these pressures might lead you to want to leave academia but continue to do research, I recommend reaching out to Context Fund. We have an amazing set of local partners, and interacting with these organizations has been very interesting for getting to know Croatia as well. So for the tech park, I sort of did this tour of the tech park on Friday. It's a massive building about a mile away that's had a huge amount of European Union cash injected, where they're doing a lot of ambitious, interesting startup work. And if you wanted Croatian collaborators, or even just to work here, they have a digital nomad visa. And then finally, a little bit about thinking about thinking. So everyone here is a volunteer. Thinking About Thinking is a nonprofit, and we aim to cultivate and spread ideas about intelligence in general. So we have some events that are like this one, which are pure fundamental research, thinking about neuroscience, radical new theories about the brain. We also have a series of summits which move around the world And there we think a lot more about AI and indeed how to bridge AI research across tech, universities, nonprofits, startups, and then how to think about what are the problems in the real world that we would like AI to help us solve for social good. So if you're interested in those, the next one will be in London in December. And with that, I thank you all. I welcome you all to the conference. I hope you have a lovely time. And if there are any general questions or any kind of concerns or anything like that, come up and speak to us at the breaks. So thank you all very much for coming. I'll start off the conference by welcoming our keynote speaker to the stage. So thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dan.